My name's Mark, I'm 35, and until recently, I thought I had a pretty normal life. My wife, Sarah, 32, and I have been married for 7 years. We've had our ups and downs, but I thought we were solid. We have 2 kids, Emma, 5, and Jake, 3, and I work long hours as a project manager while Sarah stays home with them. Looking back now, there were signs I missed. Over the past 6 months, Sarah became distant. She started snapping at me over small things, always seemed glued to her phone, and started going out with friends more often. At first, I didn't think much of it, I wanted to trust her. But lately, something hasn't felt right, and I just couldn't shake the feeling that there was more going on than she let on. I guess that's why I started paying closer attention. And now I wish I hadn't. The moment everything started unraveling came 2 weeks ago. Sarah had been acting off for months, like I mentioned, but I was trying to ignore it. I kept telling myself I was just being paranoid. She's my wife. Why would she cheat? We've built a life together. We have kids. That night, she said she was heading out with her friend, Jenna, for drinks. She kissed me on the cheek, told me not to wait up, and walked out the door. I went about my usual routine, put the kids to bed, cleaned up the kitchen, and finally sat down to relax. Around 10 p.m., her phone buzzed on the counter. She'd forgotten it at home. At first, I didn't think much of it. I wasn't going to invade her privacy or anything. But then it buzzed again. And again. The screen lit up, and I caught a glimpse of the message preview. Can't wait to see you tonight, winky face. My stomach dropped. I froze. I tried to convince myself it was some kind of joke, maybe spam, but my gut told me otherwise. I don't know what possessed me to pick up her phone, but I did. The text was from someone named Mike. I don't know a Mike, at least not one Sarah has ever mentioned. My hands were shaking as I unlocked the phone. She didn't bother changing the code, same one we've used for years. What I saw next made my head spin. There were dozens of texts between her and this Mike guy, some of them explicit. Plans to meet up, things they'd done together, inside jokes I'd never heard her mention before. And the worst? A picture of her in lingerie, taken in our bedroom. Our bed. I sat there, completely numb, rereading those messages over and over until I couldn't anymore. My mind was racing. Was she with him now? What about the kids? What about me? I don't even know how long I sat there before she came home. She walked in around midnight, acting completely normal. She even smiled at me and said, "Hey, how was your night?" I couldn't answer her. I just stared at her, feeling like my entire world had been flipped upside down. I didn't plan how to confront her. I was too overwhelmed, too furious. She walked in, all smiles, acting like everything was fine while I was sitting there holding her phone, staring at her betrayal in black and white. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe. "Who's Mike?" I asked, my voice as calm as I could make it. I didn't want to wake the kids. She froze. That smile disappeared in an instant, and her face went pale. "What are you talking about?" she stammered. I held up her phone. "You forgot this," I said, my voice shaking. "You've been texting him all night. Actually, 4 months, it looks like." Her eyes widened, and she grabbed at the phone. I pulled it back, standing up. "Don't you dare," I snapped. I've never yelled at her like that before, but I was done. "Who the hell is Mike? Don't lie to me, Sarah." She hesitated for just a moment before the floodgates opened. "He's no one," she said quickly. "It's not what you think. He's just a friend, Mark. I swear." "A friend?" I shouted, keeping my voice low enough not to wake the kids. "Friends don't send each other pictures like this." I thrust the phone in her face, showing her the lingerie photo. Her cheeks flushed bright red, but I couldn't tell if it was shame or anger. "You don't understand," she said. "It's just harmless flirting. It doesn't mean anything. I needed attention, Mark. You're never here anymore, always working late. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Harmless flirting? My blood was boiling. Harmless? I hissed. You've been meeting up with him. You've been lying to me, sneaking around. What else are you hiding? I haven't slept with him, she said, tears starting to form in her eyes. I swear, Mark. I was lonely, and he listened to me. I don't know. I made a mistake, okay? Her words felt hollow. I didn't believe her. You're telling me you're just lonely, and the solution is to sext some guy named Mike? I was pacing the room now, running my hands through my hair. You know what? Don't even answer that. I don't believe a word you're saying. Please, Mark, she said, her voice trembling. Think about the kids. Don't blow this up. It wasn't serious. I love you. Hearing her say I love you after everything I'd just seen felt like a slap in the face. You love me? I laughed bitterly. You sure have a funny way of showing it, Sarah. She started crying, which only made me angrier. It felt manipulative, like she thought tears would fix this. I don't even know who you are anymore, I said quietly. And I don't think I want to. I walked out of the room, leaving her there sobbing. I didn't trust myself to stay, afraid of what I might say or do if I did. I didn't sleep at all that night. I ended up in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. Every smile, every kiss, every moment we shared now felt like a lie. How long had she been doing this? How could I have missed it? Worse, what was I supposed to do now? Around 6 a.m., I heard Sarah in the kitchen, probably trying to keep up appearances for the kids. I stayed in the guest room, waiting until Emma and Jake left for school before I faced her again. I wasn't ready to explain to a 5-year-old why Daddy was so angry, and I sure as hell wasn't ready to see Sarah pretending everything was fine. When the house was quiet again, I finally walked into the kitchen. She was sitting at the table, nursing a cup of coffee. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. We need to talk, I said, my voice cold. She nodded, barely looking at me. I didn't sleep either, she whispered. I've been thinking about everything, and I know I screwed up, Mark. I know. You think saying you screwed up makes this better? I snapped. Do you even understand what you've done? To me? To our family? She flinched at my tone. I do, she said quietly. I hate myself for it. I hate that I hurt you, Mark. I swear, I'll do anything to fix this. Fix it? I repeated, laughing bitterly. Do you even hear yourself? You betrayed me, Sarah. You betrayed our marriage. How the hell do you think you can fix that? Her tears started again, but I didn't care. I'll cut him off, she said desperately. I already blocked his number. I'll delete everything. Please, Mark, just give me a chance to make this right. We can go to counseling, anything you want. Counseling? I shook my head. You think counseling is going to erase what I saw? The lies, the sneaking around? The goddamn picture in our bed? I was stupid, she said, her voice cracking. I wasn't thinking straight. I let myself get caught up in something I shouldn't have, but it's over now. It's over. It's not over, I shot back. It's never going to be over, Sarah. Every time I look at you, all I'm going to see is this. She opened her mouth to respond, but I held up a hand to stop her. I can't do this right now, I said. I need time to think. I walked out of the kitchen before she could say anything else. I grabbed my keys, got in the car, and drove aimlessly for hours, trying to clear my head. Every road felt like it led to a dead end. Driving around the day felt like the only way to breathe. The walls of my house, the house where I thought we'd built a life together, felt like they were closing in. I didn't know where to go or what to do, so I ended up at a park near my office. It was quiet there, and I needed quiet. My phone buzzed nonstop with texts from Sarah. Apologies. Promises. Begging me to come home and talk. I couldn't read any of it. I just sat on a bench, staring at the phone in my hand, wondering how I got here. How the hell did this become my life? At some point, I called my brother, Dave. He's the one person I've always been able to lean on. When he picked up, I didn't even say hello, I just blurted out, "Sarah's been cheating on me." There was a long silence before he finally said, "Holy shit, Mark. Are you okay?" "No," I admitted, my voice breaking. "I don't know what to do, man. I don't know how to move forward from this." "Do you want me to come over?" he asked. "We can figure this out together." "I'm not home," I said. "I can't be there right now." "All right," he said. "Stay where you are. I'll come to you." About an hour later, Dave showed up at the park. He brought coffee, sat down next to me, and just let me talk. I told him everything about the texts, the confrontation, Sarah's excuses. Saying it all out loud made it feel even more real, and it hurt like hell. "Do you think you can forgive her?" he asked after I finished. I stared at him, unsure. "How do you forgive something like this?" I said. "Every time I think about it, it's like this weight on my chest." "She lied to me, Dave. She made me feel like I was the problem." Dave nodded, looking thoughtful. "You've got to ask yourself one question," he said. "Can you ever trust her again? Because without trust, you don't have a marriage." I didn't answer him then. I didn't know the answer. When I finally got back home later that evening, Sarah was waiting in the living room. She looked like she hadn't moved all day, her face blotchy from crying. "Mark," she said as I walked in, "please talk to me." I stood in the doorway, keeping my distance. "I can't make any decisions right now," I told her. "I need time. I'm staying in the guest room for now, and I don't want to talk about this again until I'm ready." Her lip quivered, but she nodded. "Whatever you need," she said quietly. I didn't tell her then, but Dave's question kept echoing in my mind, "Can you ever trust her again?" The first few days after I told Sarah I needed time were some of the darkest I've ever experienced. I moved into the guest room, but even in there, I couldn't escape her. The sound of her footsteps outside the door, the muffled cries late at night, her lingering scent on the pillows, all of it reminded me of what she'd done. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I went to work, but my mind wasn't there. People would ask me if I was okay, and I'd force a smile and mumble something about being tired. The truth was, I felt hollow. Like I'd been gutted and was just going through the motions. Sarah kept trying to reach out to me. She'd knock on the guest room door, ask if we could talk. She left notes in the kitchen, little sticky notes that said things like, "I love you," or "I'm sorry." Once, she slid a letter under the door, a long, emotional apology where she swore she'd never cheated physically and begged for another chance. I didn't respond to any of it. I wasn't ready. Instead, I spent most of my free time talking to Dave or scrolling through forums like this one, trying to figure out if anyone had been through something similar. I needed to know if it was possible to survive this kind of betrayal or if I even wanted to. Then came the guilt. Not guilt for anything I'd done, I knew I wasn't to blame for her actions, but guilt for the kids. Emma and Jake had no idea what was happening, but I knew they could sense something was wrong. I wasn't myself around them, and Sarah was walking on eggshells, trying to act like everything was fine. I hated that we were dragging them through this, and I hated that their world might never be the same. But even in the fog of anger and sadness, a tiny voice in my head kept asking the same question: what if she's telling the truth? What if it was just emotional? What if she really did cut him off? Wouldn't it be worth it to try for the kids? I didn't want to think about it, but the question was there, nagging at me. It kept me up at night, and when I did sleep, my dreams were filled with flashes of Sarah and Mike laughing together, touching, kissing. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my heart racing. On the fourth day, I finally decided I needed help. I couldn't sort through this alone. That morning, I made 2 phone calls, one to a therapist who specialized in infidelity, and another to a lawyer. I wasn't sure yet if I wanted to save my marriage or end it, but I knew I needed to prepare for either possibility. When Sarah saw me leave with a folder of papers, she asked me where I was going. I told her the truth. I've made an appointment with a therapist, and I've consulted a lawyer. I'm not making any decisions yet, but I'm taking steps to figure out what's next. Her face crumpled, and she reached for me. "Mark, please," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Don't give up on us." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just walked out the door. The first session with the therapist was harder than I expected. I didn't think I'd cry hell. I'd been so angry that I didn't even feel like I had tears left. But the moment I sat down and started explaining everything, it all came rushing out. The betrayal. The fear. The anger. The shame. Dr. Klein, the therapist, was calm and understanding. She let me vent without interruption, then asked one simple question: "Mark, what do you want?" I stared at her, completely at a loss. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't know if I can forgive her, but I don't know if I can walk away either. We have kids. A life. And I loved her. I still do, in a way." "That's normal," she said. "What you're feeling is a mixture of grief and shock. Grief for the relationship you thought you had and shock at the betrayal. But until you know what you truly want, whether that's reconciliation or separation, you're going to feel stuck." I left that session feeling lighter, but not by much. She'd helped me see that I needed time to process everything, but time felt like a luxury I didn't have. Every day felt like a tug-of-war between staying and leaving. Later that afternoon, I had my consultation with the lawyer. I didn't tell Sarah where I was going, and honestly, I wasn't sure if I even wanted to follow through with anything. But I needed to know my options, for me and for the kids. The lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Rachel, walked me through the basics. Custody arrangements. Division of assets. How the court would view Sarah's infidelity. Hint, not much, since it wasn't physical, or at least that's what she was claiming. She made it clear that while the road ahead wouldn't be easy, it was manageable if I decided to go down that path. At the end of the meeting, Rachel looked at me and said, "Mark, I know this is overwhelming, but my advice? Don't make any rash decisions. Take the time to gather your thoughts and figure out what's best for you and your kids. Whether that's staying in the marriage or ending it, you need to feel confident in your choice." That night, I sat in the guest room and tried to imagine both futures, one where I stayed and fought to rebuild what Sarah had broken, and one where I walked away and started over. Both seemed impossible. The next day, Sarah knocked on the guest room door again. "Mark," she said softly, "I made an appointment with a therapist too. For me. I know you don't believe me, but I'm serious about fixing this." I didn't know what to say. Part of me was glad she was taking some responsibility, but another part of me wondered if it was too little, too late. "Good," I said finally. "You need to figure yourself out, Sarah. Because right now, I don't know if I can." Her face fell, but she nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes," she whispered. Therapy was supposed to help me find clarity, but in the beginning, it only seemed to make things more complicated. Dr. Klein asked me to reflect on the foundation of my relationship with Sarah, what brought us together, what made us work, and, most importantly, what went wrong. That last question was like a punch to the gut. I didn't want to admit it, but somewhere deep down, I knew things had been slipping long before I discovered the texts. Between my long hours at work, her struggles adjusting to life as a stay-at-home mom, and the endless demands of parenting, we'd stopped being partners. Somewhere along the line, we became two people sharing a house instead of a life. That didn't justify what she did, of course. Nothing could. But it did make me wonder, if we'd been better to each other, would Mike have ever entered the picture? While I wrestled with my emotions, Sarah was making an effort, at least on the surface. She started going to her own therapy sessions and left the appointment cards on the counter, almost like she wanted me to see them. She apologized every chance she got, though her words often felt hollow. And she spent more time with the kids, trying to shoulder more of the load while I figured things out. But every time I saw her, the texts came flooding back. Every I love you felt tainted, every kiss a lie. I tried not to think about the picture of her in our bed, the inside jokes with Mike, the way she'd smiled in those messages. But it was always there, like a splinter I couldn't remove. One night, about 2 weeks after the initial confrontation, she came to the guest room door again. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. I hesitated, then opened the door and gestured for her to come in. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap. "I know I'm the last person you want to hear from right now," she began, "but I need you to know something." I crossed my arms, waiting. She took a deep breath. "I've been digging into why I did what I did," she said. "And I think I was looking for validation. I felt invisible, Mark. You were working all the time, and when you were home, you were exhausted. I felt like the kids got all of you, and I got nothing." Her words stung, but I stayed quiet. "I'm not saying that to blame you," she added quickly. "What I did was wrong. So wrong. But I need you to understand that it wasn't about you not being enough. It was about me not being enough for myself, for you, for the kids. I didn't know how to handle it, so I let myself fall into something I shouldn't have. I wanted to feel sympathy. I wanted to believe her. But all I could think about was how her validation came at the expense of my trust. Do you even understand what you've done to me?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You didn't just hurt me, Sarah. You destroyed us. How do you come back from that?" She wiped a tear from her cheek. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I want to try, if you'll let me. For the kids. For us. The kids." That's what it always came back to. I loved them more than anything, and the thought of breaking up our family was unbearable. But staying with Sarah felt just as impossible. That night, I lay awake for hours, torn between my heart, which wanted to believe in second chances, and my head, which screamed at me to protect myself. The days that followed were a whirlwind of uncertainty. Every conversation with Sarah felt like walking a tightrope, one wrong word, and everything could come crashing down. Meanwhile, I started exploring both paths, reconciliation and separation. Each felt like stepping into the unknown, and neither seemed less painful than the other. I met with the lawyer again to get more clarity. Rachel was blunt but fair, outlining what separation would look like. We talked about custody arrangements, dividing assets, and how to explain it all to the kids. "What you need to understand," she said, "is that this will be a process, not a quick fix. It's going to be messy, but if this is the choice you make, we can get you through it." She gave me a folder filled with information, steps to take, documents I'd need, and advice on how to protect myself financially and emotionally during a divorce. I took it home and tucked it away in the guest room, unsure if I'd ever use it. At the same time, I started researching what reconciliation would require. I talked to Dr. Klein about the possibility of trying to rebuild trust. "It's not impossible," she said, "but it will take time, patience, and honesty from both of you. And you have to be clear about your boundaries and what you need to feel safe moving forward." Sarah was eager to do whatever I asked. She started being more transparent, sharing her phone passwords, showing me her schedule, and updating me on her therapy sessions. She even suggested couples counseling, which felt like a step in the right direction but also like a band-aid on a bullet wound. The therapist gave me an exercise, write down everything I needed from Sarah to even consider moving forward. It felt strange, almost transactional, but it helped me organize my thoughts. Here's what I came up with: no contact with Mike, not just deleting his number but cutting him out entirely, no lingering social media connections or hidden messages. Complete transparency, access to her phone, emails, and anything else that might ease my paranoia. Couples counseling, a neutral space to address the deeper issues in our marriage. Patience, acknowledgement that rebuilding trust would take a long time, and I wouldn't rush my emotions to make her feel better. A reason to stay: I needed to see genuine change, not just for me, but for her and the kids. When I showed her the list, she nodded through tears. "I'll do it all, Mark," she said. "Anything you need." But even as she said it, a nagging voice in the back of my mind whispered, "Can you ever really trust her again?" I spent my days with one foot in each world. I'd meet with Rachel, preparing for the worst, then come home to Sarah, who was bending over backward to prove she was committed to fixing things. It was exhausting, trying to navigate two futures at once. The hardest part was the kids. Emma asked why I wasn't sleeping in the same bed as Mommy, and Jake started waking up in the middle of the night, crying for no reason. I hated that my choices were affecting them, and I hated that I didn't have an answer yet. One evening, Sarah and I had a rare quiet moment after the kids were in bed. She poured us both a glass of wine and sat across from me at the table. "Mark," she said, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need to know, do you think there's any hope for us?" I stared into my glass, swirling the wine as I searched for the right words. "I don't know," I said finally. "I want to say yes, for the kids, for everything we've built. But I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way." Her face crumpled, and she started to cry. "I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make this up to you," she said. "Please don't give up on me." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe we could fix this. But I also wanted to protect myself from more heartbreak. Part 10 is next, where I'll share the decision I made and the aftermath of that choice. It wasn't easy, but it finally brought me a sense of direction. I don't think there was a single moment when I decided. It wasn't like a lightning bolt or some grand epiphany. It was more like a slow, aching clarity that crept in as I sat with my thoughts, weighed the pros and cons, and reflected on what I wanted for myself and my kids. Sarah's efforts didn't go unnoticed. She was doing everything I asked, being transparent, going to therapy, showing up for the kids in ways she hadn't before. But every time she said, "I love you," it felt like a lie. The trust was gone, and I didn't know if I could ever get it back. One evening, I found myself sitting in the guest room, staring at that folder Rachel had given me. The steps to end my marriage were all laid out in black and white. It was daunting, but as I flipped through the pages, something strange happened. I didn't feel fear, I felt relief. Like a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying was finally lifting. The next morning, I sat Sarah down. The kids were at school, and the house was quiet. I could tell she knew something was coming from the way she fidgeted with her coffee mug. "Sarah," I began, "I've thought about this a lot. And I've realized something: I don't think I can ever trust you again. No matter how much you try, no matter what we do, the damage is done." Her eyes filled with tears. "Mark, please," she whispered. "We can rebuild." "We can try." "I've been trying," I interrupted, my voice firm but calm. "I've been trying to imagine a future where I don't look at you and see the betrayal. But I can't. And that's not fair to me, or to you, or to the kids. They deserve parents who are whole, not parents who are just going through the motions." She started to cry, her shoulders shaking as she buried her face in her hands. I felt a pang of guilt, but I knew this was the right choice. Staying together for the kids wouldn't protect them from the tension, the resentment, the cracks in our foundation. It would only teach them that love was supposed to hurt. "I'm going to file for divorce," I said gently. "I don't hate you, Sarah. But I can't stay with you." She didn't respond right away, just nodded through her tears. "What about the kids?" she asked finally. "How do we tell them?" "We'll do it together," I said. When the time is right. We'll make sure they know it's not their fault and that we both love them. That conversation was the beginning of the end. I met with Rachel to start the paperwork, and Sarah moved into the guest room while we figured out the logistics. We agreed to keep things civil for the kids, and so far, we've managed to stick to that promise. Telling Emma and Jake was the hardest part. We kept it simple, explaining that Mommy and Daddy would be living in different houses but that they'd always have both of us. Emma cried, and Jake didn't fully understand, but we reassured them over and over that we'd still be a family in our own way. It's been a few months since I made the decision. Some days, I wake up and feel at peace, like I've finally reclaimed my life. Other days, I wake up and miss the Sarah I thought I knew. But overall, I know I made the right choice. I'm slowly rediscovering who I am outside of this marriage, and I'm finding joy in little moments with the kids that remind me why I made this sacrifice. If I've learned anything, it's this: love isn't always enough. Trust is the foundation of everything, and once it's broken, it's almost impossible to rebuild. For anyone reading this who might be in a similar situation, my advice is simple: listen to your gut. It's hard to let go, but sometimes, it's the only way to move forward. The first few weeks post-divorce felt surreal, like stepping into a life I didn't recognize. The papers were signed, Sarah moved out, and we began navigating the new normal of shared custody. Suddenly, I was a part-time dad, and the quiet of my house when the kids weren't there was deafening. I'd sit in their empty rooms, surrounded by toys and half-finished drawings, and feel the weight of everything I'd lost. But I also felt something else: freedom. For the first time in months, I wasn't walking on eggshells or second-guessing every interaction. It was bittersweet, but it was real. Emma and Jake have been troopers through all of this. Emma still asks questions sometimes: why can't Mommy and Daddy live together anymore? And those are the moments that break me. But I do my best to reassure her that we both love her and Jake more than anything. Jake, being younger, has adapted more easily. He loves the idea of having two houses, and every time he comes back to me, he greets me like he hasn't seen me in years. Those little moments of joy have been my anchor. Sarah and I worked hard to create a stable co-parenting arrangement. We keep the communication focused on the kids, and while it's not always easy, it's civil. I won't lie, there are still moments when seeing her stings, but I remind myself that letting go was the healthiest choice for all of us. For so long, my identity was tied to being a husband and father. After the divorce, I had to figure out who I was without those roles defining me. Therapy helped. Dr. Klein encouraged me to explore hobbies I'd given up, reconnect with old friends, and take time to heal. I started going to the gym again, not for Sarah or anyone else, but for me. I picked up hiking, something I hadn't done since my 20s, and even joined a local group. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving, I was living. Forgiveness was the hardest part. Not just forgiving Sarah, but forgiving myself for missing the signs, for staying too long, for not being enough. Therapy taught me that forgiveness doesn't mean condoning what happened, it means choosing to let go of the anger so it doesn't control you. As for Sarah, I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive her. But I've stopped letting her actions dictate my emotions. She's apologized more times than I can count, and while I accept that she regrets what she did, I know I made the right decision in ending our marriage. It's been about 6 months now, and while I'm not rushing into anything, I've started thinking about the possibility of dating again. The idea is daunting, but also exciting. I'm a different person than I was before, stronger and more aware of what I want and don't want in a partner. The kids are thriving, and that's what matters most to me. Emma's getting more confident every day, and Jake's imagination is endless. Every time I see them smile, I know I'm doing something right. If I've learned anything from this experience, it's this: trust is the foundation of love. Once it's gone, everything else crumbles. Your happiness matters. Staying in a broken relationship for the sake of others only prolongs the pain. Healing takes time. Don't rush it. Allow yourself to feel everything: the anger, the sadness, the hope. You're stronger than you think. Even when it feels like the world is falling apart, you can rebuild. For anyone reading this, know that it's okay to prioritize yourself. It's okay to demand better. And it's okay to walk away if staying feels like losing yourself. Life after betrayal isn't easy, but it's possible and worth it. Life after divorce has been a journey of rediscovery. At first, I felt like I was piecing together a puzzle where half the pieces were missing. But as time has gone on, I've realized that those missing pieces weren't lost, they were pieces of myself I hadn't even created yet. One of the first things I did after Sarah moved out was reclaim the house. It sounds trivial, but it was therapeutic. I rearranged the furniture, repainted the walls, and donated things that no longer felt like me. I even turned what used to be the guest room, my refuge during the fallout, into a hobby space where I could work on projects, read, or just decompress. The kids helped me with some of the changes, too. Emma picked out a new rug for the living room, and Jake decided that the fridge needed more magnets for his artwork. It was small, but it made the house feel like ours instead of a painful reminder of what had been. One of the biggest changes has been my focus on health, physical, mental, and emotional. I started cooking more instead of relying on takeout, experimenting with recipes that Emma loves to help with, though Jake mostly just sneaks the ingredients. I've stayed consistent with the gym, and hiking has become a weekly ritual. There's something about being out in nature that makes everything else feel manageable. Therapy remains a cornerstone of my healing. I still see Dr. Klein every other week, and each session helps me unpack something new. I've learned to set boundaries, to communicate more honestly, and most importantly, to be kind to myself. During my marriage, I let a lot of relationships drift. I didn't realize how isolated I'd become until I started reaching out to old friends. Some of them welcomed me back like no time had passed, others took some work to reconnect with. But those efforts have paid off. I've rebuilt a support system that I didn't even know I needed. My family has also been incredible. My brother Dave has been my rock through all of this, and my parents have gone above and beyond to help with the kids when I need a break. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm not carrying everything on my own. One thing I didn't expect was how freeing single life would feel. Without the constant tension of a broken marriage, I've been able to say yes to things I wouldn't have before. I joined a hiking group and met people who share my interests. I've taken on new challenges at work and even started thinking about pursuing a certification I've been putting off for years. And while I'm not actively looking to date, I won't lie, it's crossed my mind. The idea of starting over is scary, but it's also exciting. I've realized that I'm in no rush. When I'm ready, I'll know. If there's one thing I'm most proud of, it's how I've been there for Emma and Jake through all of this. We've established new routines, movie nights, pancake breakfasts, and adventure days where we explore somewhere new. They've shown me resilience I didn't know they had, and I'm determined to keep building a life where they feel loved, supported, and secure. I'm not the same person I was before the betrayal, and that's okay. I'm learning to embrace the new version of myself, one that's stronger, wiser, and more willing to take risks. I know there will still be hard days, but I also know I can handle them. I've made it this far, and there's no going back. As I've worked through the aftermath of my marriage ending, I've found myself reflecting on what love, trust, and relationships mean to me now. Betrayal has a way of shaking your foundation, but it also forces you to rebuild it, hopefully stronger and more resilient than before. I used to think love was about sacrifice, putting someone else first, even when it hurt. But now I realize love isn't about losing yourself in someone else's needs. It's about partnership, respect, support. It's about showing up for each other, not because you're obligated to, but because you want to. The kind of love I want moving forward is grounded in equality. I want someone who sees me as a teammate, not just a provider. Someone who values open communication, mutual growth, and shared dreams. And if I can't find that, I'd rather be on my own than settle for less. Trust is the hardest thing to rebuild, not just in others, but in myself. There's a part of me that's still angry at myself for not seeing the signs sooner, for ignoring the red flags, for staying longer than I should have. But I've learned to have grace for that version of me. He was doing the best he could with what he knew at the time. As for trusting others, I know it'll take time. I've started small, letting new friends in, opening up to people in ways I hadn't before. It's scary, but it's also rewarding. Trusting someone again feels like holding your breath underwater, but each time I take the plunge, I come up a little stronger. The love I have for Emma and Jake hasn't just stayed the same through all of this, it's grown. They've been my light in the darkest moments, my reason to keep moving forward. Every laugh, every hug, every "I love you, Daddy" reminds me that I'm building something better for them, even if it's not the life I originally planned. They've taught me that love doesn't have to be perfect to be powerful. It just has to be genuine. I don't know what the future looks like, and for the first time in my life, I'm okay with that. I've stopped trying to plan every step and started focusing on the present. Right now, that means being the best father I can be, continuing to work on myself, and staying open to whatever comes next. I've also started to think about love as something I might welcome again someday. Not now, but maybe down the road. When I do, I know I'll be more cautious, but also more intentional. I'll look for someone who complements my life, not completes it. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this: healing is messy, and it's not linear. There will be days when you feel like you're making progress and days when you feel like you're back at square one. But every step forward, no matter how small, is a victory. Love yourself enough to demand better, whether that means fighting for a relationship or walking away. And remember, you're stronger than you think. If I can come out the other side of this, so can you. After months of pain, reflection, and rebuilding, I've started finding joy in places I never thought to look before. It's strange how something as devastating as betrayal can shift your perspective, showing you the beauty and simplicity and the importance of being present. One of the first steps I took toward healing was forcing myself to focus on small, positive moments. The way the sunlight filters through the kitchen window in the morning. The sound of Emma and Jake's laughter when they're playing together. The satisfaction of a home-cooked meal. These moments are small, but they remind me that life doesn't have to be extraordinary to be fulfilling. The kids have been my greatest source of joy. We've created new traditions like Saturday morning pancake art contests, where we try to make the weirdest shapes in animals. Emma's recent masterpiece was a lopsided unicorn, and Jake's attempt at a dinosaur ended up looking more like a blob. It doesn't matter. Their laughter is the prize. Another surprising source of happiness has been reconnecting with old friends and forming new ones. I joined a local hiking group, initially just to get out of the house, but it's turned into something I genuinely look forward to. There's something healing about being surrounded by people who share a common goal, even if it's as simple as reaching the top of a trail. One of the group members, a guy named Chris, has become a good friend. He went through his own messy divorce a few years back, and his perspective has been invaluable. We've had long talks during hikes, sharing stories and advice. It's comforting to know I'm not alone in this journey. In many ways, I'm getting to know myself all over again. For years, my identity was wrapped up in being a husband and father, and while I'll always be the latter, I'm learning to appreciate who I am as an individual. I've started reading more, something I hadn't done in years, and even picked up guitar lessons, a dream I'd put off for too long. One of the most rewarding discoveries has been realizing that I'm stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. There were days when I didn't think I could make it through, but here I am, not just surviving, but thriving. Life isn't perfect, it never will be. There are still moments when the past creeps in, when I question decisions or feel the weight of what's been lost. But those moments are fewer and farther between. What I've learned is that imperfection doesn't make life any less beautiful. In fact, it's the imperfections that make the good moments shine brighter. As I move forward, I'm not fixated on the idea of a perfect future. I'm focused on creating a meaningful one for myself, for Emma and Jake, and maybe, someday, for someone else. I'm learning to embrace uncertainty, to see it as an opportunity rather than a threat. I'm not rushing into anything, whether it's dating, career moves, or big life changes. Right now, I'm content. Content with who I am, where I am, and the possibilities ahead. If you're going through something similar, my advice is this: give yourself permission to find joy, even when it feels like you shouldn't. Start small. Celebrate the little victories. Lean on the people who love you. And most importantly, be kind to yourself. Healing isn't about erasing the pain, it's about learning to carry it without letting it weigh you down. As I sit here writing this, I can't help but reflect on how much has changed in such a short time. The person I was before Sarah's betrayal feels like a distant memory, but the person I become is someone I'm proud of, someone who has faced heartbreak and come out the other side stronger, wiser, and more grounded. If there's one thing this journey has given me, it's clarity. I've learned so much about myself, what I value, what I need in a relationship, and, most importantly, what I deserve. I've rediscovered my worth, not as a husband, not even as a father, but as a person. And that's something no one can take away from me. I've also gained a deeper appreciation for the people in my life. My kids, my brother Dave, my friends, even strangers I've met through this journey, they've all reminded me that love and support come in many forms. I'm not alone, and I never will be. I won't sugarcoat it, the loss is real. I lost a version of my life I thought was unshakable, a family structure I thought would last forever. And I lost the woman I thought Sarah was. That loss will always sting, but it doesn't define me. What I've come to realize, though, is that sometimes losing something makes room for something better. It's not easy to let go, but when you do, you open yourself up to growth, to possibility, to hope. The future is wide open, and for the first time in a long time, I'm okay with that. I'm taking things one day at a time, focusing on being the best father I can be, continuing to grow as an individual, and staying open to whatever life has in store. Will I date again? Probably. But not yet. I'm not rushing to fill the void because I've learned that my happiness doesn't depend on anyone else. When the time comes, I'll approach it with the lessons I've learned, with clear boundaries and a better understanding of what love truly means. To everyone who has followed my story, who has offered support, advice, or even just listened, thank you. Sharing this journey has been therapeutic in ways I never expected. I hope my story has resonated with someone out there, that it's helped you feel less alone in your own struggles. If there's one thing I want to leave you with, it's this: life is messy, painful, and unpredictable. But it's also beautiful, surprising, and full of second chances, not just with others, but with yourself. Don't be afraid to let go of what's holding you back. Don't be afraid to choose yourself. Because at the end of the day, you deserve love, trust, and happiness. And those things start from within. Here's to new beginnings. Here's to hope. Here's to whatever comes next. Thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think.